All right, it's recording.
Okay, good evening. In case there are any attendees who don't know me and haven't attended any of our sessions before, I'm Jim Reed. I have the great honor and pleasure of facilitating the Financial Sustainability Task Force. And it is our 8th and last meeting. So I just wanted to say 3 things before I open it up for some public comment, and we'll get into the committee work this evening. First of all, I just wanted to thank the committee. You've been an absolute joy to work with. And I'm very impressed how seriously you took this civic responsibility. You all worked extremely hard. You've been reading budgets and all of the volumes of material that we've sent you. And throughout this process, you've asked great questions and demonstrated that you were learning and thinking very strategically. So it's been really a delight for me, but I bet I'm talking for the staff too, for all of us to be working with you. The second thing I just wanted to make clear, although I think Jeff will define this even more a little bit later, that what we are working toward tonight is a package of strategies with a set of recommendations from the task force and even a timeline that would give your recommendations in terms of when should these different strategies be implemented. And again, I want to reiterate that Jeff, who has been taking the lead in a way since he put together his matrix and has been so helpful. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about this, and then we do want the committee to chime in terms of what is it that, what's the format of the recommendations. And then the third thing I just wanted to say is that last night I was taking notes, and I thought that starting with Mike and Lynn, both of you articulated some key principles. Once we moved to the matrix that Jeff had put in front of us on the screen, I heard many more things that were said throughout the evening that constituted interests or guiding principles. And I took some notes, and then this morning I went through them. And this is not a complete list, but I thought it would be wise to articulate them right now to set the tone for tonight's meeting, and also to give the task force members kind of a reminder or even get you thinking in terms of what are the criteria or what are the guiding principles that you are using in making your recommendations. And so I'll just read them real quickly. There are 5. The first is to implement a balanced approach that recognizes and reflects 3 things. 1, changes in state regulations. 2, the fact that Kenmore has changed considerably since it became a city 22 years ago. And 3, we want to reflect community conditions, needs, and interests. The second guiding principle I heard is to minimize the impact on low-income residents. The third is to fund services of the highest value to Kenmore residents and businesses. The fourth thing I think I heard from all of you on the task force is that where possible, shift the burden of paying for services to those who use them, including non-residents. And finally, the 5th one is maintain realistic levels of service, including when or if revenues increase. So this may not be a full list, but that was my distillation of the things I heard you all saying last night. And I thought that they were important because perhaps they are even going to be the way that you frame your recommendations, or that they could serve as even some criteria tonight. So just recommending that you keep those in mind. Okay. I'm now going to move to public comment. I'm seeing 3 attendees. Again, I have the very able help of Tila in monitoring this. Let me just say a couple things again about the public comment. This is a task force meeting, but ever since we started meeting in January, the task force has welcomed and benefited from public comment. So in a minute, I think I'm going to ask for a show of hands to see how many people would like to comment. We have allocated 5 minutes, but if we were going to have 5 or 6 or 7 people talking tonight, and I was kind of anticipating that, doesn't look like it might happen, but I would have divided up maybe into 2-minute segments to make sure we could accommodate everybody, but there are just now 4 people. So I'll ask for a show of hands first to see who is thinking at this point that they want to address the task force. I just want to remind everybody that this is a task force meeting. It's not a public hearing. So I would ask you to just keep your comments to, I think right now we can say 3 minutes. And then actually at the end of all of you commenting, I'll just see if there's anybody new who has joined us and ask if they have a comment. So we might go a little bit beyond 5 minutes tonight, but since this is the last task force meeting, I think that's perfectly okay. So I'm looking at the list of attendees. I see that there are 4 of you. I think Tila sees the same thing. First, I would ask, is there a show of hands in terms of any or all of you who might want to make a comment tonight?
So you can raise your hand through Zoom by clicking on participants, and then it should be an option at the bottom of that screen.
And I see that John Hendrickson has raised his hand.
Yep. All right, I will go ahead and move him over so he can talk.
Okay. So we're moving John into the panelists column.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you should see the timer now up on the screen.
John, welcome, and you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Is he here? Let's see. There he is.
Okay.
All right, we can hear you.
I thought we had 5 minutes.
No, we've always had 3.
That's a total time.
Per person.
Okay. I got another email I'm going to send to the council and to you folks just to follow through on the 1997 feasibility study. You guys are, in effect, rewriting this study. And so what I wanted to point out is that there were some errors. When we looked at the original calculation, we had an operating surplus of $1.7 million. And that operating surplus would go into capital projects, and that revenue source was going to make up 68.7% of our capital projects. Now, the only problem is when you actually look at the detail in the report, there's a couple of errors. And there's a statement in the back on page 159 that says you cannot rely on 21% of your revenue, which was the sales tax equalization, which was unreliable and went away around 2001. So if you prudently readjusted that schedule to take that income out, and then there's 2 errors. They didn't have the surface water management operating expense in there, and they didn't have the expense for to transfer the overlay cost to capital projects of $300,000. If you put that in, we're running a deficit of $316,000 in the original study. And then that means our capital projects loses 68% of their revenue. So they would be down to around 748,000 in capital projects. Now, the biggest, you say Kenmore has changed a lot. The biggest change is the density and the housing that we've put in, but we have the same substandard roads that are very dangerous. And it seems that's really a violation of the Growth Management Act with concurrency issues, but that's another subject. The point here is that if you actually had the correct numbers, who is going to vote to become a city if we're going to run an operating deficit of 300,000 and you only have 700,000 in capital projects? And if you wanted to make your roads safe, it was probably going to cost somewhere around 300 million. That would take 400 years to bring our roads up to road standards. So when you think about how you're working through this process and the recommendations, you have to be careful that you're really using good, accurate information that the public can trust. I feel that that report that they gave us in '97, although well written and very valuable, the bottom line numbers were very deceiving, and no one would have voted to become a city. And if you're not going to fund our roads, you are contributing to that same public deception. So your key recommendation is we need a dedicated source to fund our road improvements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tila, you're going to take down the screen for, or just tell, is anybody else? Do we have any other attendees who want to speak tonight?
I don't see that there are any hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, John. And we will move on then to the business of the evening, which is the task force continuing to build on its successes of last night. I'm going to hand this to Jeff. And maybe, Jeff, you wanted to kind of walk us through the process, and you're going to take us through the matrix. And I'll be here to support you however I can, all of you.
Excellent. Thank you. Tila, I'm trying to share my screen and it says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I just fixed it. That should, does it work now?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Uh-huh.
All right. I think we want to go with screen 3. Okay. So just to pick up where we left off, this is the document that I had kind of assembled on the fly, and we put some of our thoughts in, and kind of a yes/no type vote on each of these different proposals in Steve Toller and Management Partners document and model. So we went through these, and it was discovered that I had not included the service level reductions portion or items from the recommendations, and there were several items in the balancing act tool, and then other things that we have previously discussed at previous meetings, or that Rob, the city manager, has talked about, that I think it would also be worth discussing as a task force. So I did take some time to modify the matrix that we discussed last night, and to make it a bit more comprehensive so that we can actually use this as a tool to come together. And one thing I wanted to pose to the group is there was some discussion and hesitation around sort of this yes/no dichotomy. There's a lot of qualifications if we'd like to know more information, or this might be a priority to pursue, but since we don't have all the information, or some of these things are contingent on what is discovered, there was some discussion about kind of defining what yes/no means and things like that. And so what I wanted to open it up first to talk about, what is it we're trying to accomplish with do we want this yes/no concept to be part of what we deliver to the city council? Or do we want to just use this as a tool to create a scenario? One other thing I would like to show you is that Steve actually was kind enough to share his the model that built his recommendations, and so we can use this model to put these little X's on those initiatives or those options that we would like to set as a priority, or for a given scenario that we're proposing. And then we can see, we can also set when. So if we want to delay one of these options, we can, for example, this alternative jail provider would not take effect until 2024. Because it would take time to find that and establish a contract. So we can make assumptions about that. And then also this phase period is how long does it take to ramp up? So for example, the photo traffic enforcement, the assumption would be that it would go into effect in 2022, but that we would only get about half of the impact of that option in 2022. So we wouldn't see the full impact of it until 2023. So we can use this tool to create a recommendation for the council. And so we can use this matrix to kind of decide what to put in that tool. But also, just as another option, and I'll open the floor up to others who want to give their thoughts. I also kind of created another version that is a little bit more defined on how we can kind of establish what our priorities are. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of, as we were kind of teasing out, okay, yes with hesitation, or a qualified yes or a qualified no. We were kind of settling around this sliding scale of 4 options. And I personally, I thought we could define those as, 3 would be the highest score, pursue as a priority, 2, pursue as a secondary priority or with less dedicated resources, or we have, if we need to drop into that second bucket, we've got that. A 1 would be something that we are open to the idea, but there are hesitations, or we want to pursue as a last resort, we would rather focus on other items. And 0 is just we're not interested in this. We don't think this represents the values of our community, or would not be a good way to achieve financial sustainability. So I wanted to ask I think this would be a really great way to communicate all of our thoughts and priorities to the council, along with a specific scenario that we're proposing. And so I thought this might be a good way, but I would love to get everybody else's thoughts. I kind of put some thought into this, but I want to make sure that everybody else kind of contributes to how we're thinking about it.
I like the scoring system because I think it gives us a better sense of where we're thinking we want to pursue options or not, instead of the yes or no and trying to do that. So I really appreciate you putting all of this effort into this. It's really fantastic, Jeff.
I agree. I think that approach provides a higher level of granularity and would actually provide more valuable information for the council.
Yeah.
Agreed on the appreciation of weighted answers in urgency and color code. Jeff, you're blowing my mind. Like I can't even deal right now. You don't know how important it is. Us teachers love that.
love the colors.
Love it.
Okay, so I did go ahead and I translated our yes no positions. If it was a yes, I marked it as a 3. If it was a no, I marked it as a 0. A hesitant or a qualified or a conditional yes, I marked as a 2, and a hesitant no, I marked as a 1. So if any of you see a score that you laid out here that is not consistent with your current view, or you would like to score differently, just let me know, and we can change those. But what I did wanted to do is
Jeff, before you go on, I had a quick comment about what Jim had to say last night. Was that to look, I agreed also with looking at the answers, the ones that were clear or yes, to be able to see what that did to the numbers, and to give a snapshot after we got, finished with that weighted system. And now that you've weighted it, that might even make it, that should make it even more clear to see what that snapshot is, and then go back in to tease out the rest of those question marks. So I just wanted to remember that, or not to forget that way that you framed it, Jim, to say, let's see how far we've gotten with that too.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just think it's important to say that apparently, because I can only see 6 of you at the moment, but Anthony has not joined us. We are expecting him. And then Lynn is not here tonight because of her conflict over at Kirkland. So maybe Anthony will join us. I sent him an email reminding him that it is starting. Okay. Anyways, okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, thank you for now, and Jim. So what I think would be a good way to start is, we have some of these, and I took some of the comments and answers that we discussed on the service level reductions that we didn't actually get on paper because I hadn't fully completed this matrix yet. But I thought that we might start here with the things that we didn't, and make sure that we're solid on where we stand on these service level reductions, and also maybe the other initiatives. And then that's where we can take a step and say, okay, where this sort of weighted average of our answers is consolidated into this column M, the round average. And this we have a 2 or higher, or a 3 or higher, and we can see how we are doing compared to our funding goal. And then once we've kind of established where we want to be, then we can discuss timing. Does that make sense as far as a phasing approach goes?
Yeah, I think for me, based on Rob's previous email, breaking down the number of officers and everything, I want to change mine for police to 0.
Okay. For the attendees, Rob did forward an email to the task force about from the chief of police discussing the and Fernell, I don't know, Fernell, did you have a chance to read that memo?
I saw the one about the HR position and all. The police one must have just came through recently because I missed that one. Can I go take a peek real quick and I'll.
Yeah, absolutely. It is pretty detailed. So I'll summarize what.
Okay.
And if anybody else wants to jump in, Rob, feel free to jump in. But my impression was from the document is that the chief of police is saying that the number of officers that we have compared to the number of citizens is actually very, very low. So that speaks to the safety of the overall safety of our community, as well as the efficiency of our officers. I think, and also the use of force is also very low compared to our peers. And to try to reduce staffing more would mean that we would not have that target minimum of 2 officers on duty at any given time. And he also made the case that by reducing the number of on-duty officers to below 2, that introduces issues, things like an officer responding to a call, not having any backup can actually drive more use of force rather than less. And so he wanted the memo just wanted to make sure that those dynamics were considered when thinking about the police budget. So
Steph, it was 13 officers. Is that correct, or Rob?
Yeah, the 13 officers that we have allow us to have 2 officer minimum staffing 24/7, 365. So it takes 13 officers in order to provide 2 officer minimum coverage all day, every day. And there's certain calls that require 2 officer presence. The types of 911 calls range from priority X, which is the most urgent, and then priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 3 of those categories require 2 officer dispatched for officer safety reasons. And that's priority X, priority 1, and priority 2. If we went to less than 2 officers per thousand, or 2 officer minimum staffing, and went to 1, then we'd have to wait for a shoreline officer to become available for those calls. Also, there's other calls such as domestic violence calls where we're required to have 2 officers respond to the call. So.
You said shoreline, is that Lake Forest Park? Shoreline Lake Forest Park?
Shoreline contracts with King County Sheriff, and as well as we share officers and sergeants.
But not Lake Forest Park?
Right. Yep.
It was like they're closer.
They have their own city.
In real emergencies, we can definitely, we all help each other, but on most calls for service, we try to rely on other sheriff's deputies.
So my question or my concern about that, or just in thinking about how I'm thinking about officers, is the militarization of them, meaning the more equipment that is offered to them that may, again, doesn't match our city makeup or necessity. And that's where I wanted to push back on the numbers and put those resources towards, as we talked about, more team effort, community service, mental health, family services, child protective services, to be able to show up as a team. I wanted realignment to take away from that militarization component of all the extra artillery to service our community. That makes it feel like it's over policed, even though there's a low number. So I didn't have details on that. That's what I'm asking about. The balance tool didn't really flesh that out. And so that's why I was pushing back to say, well, let's look at those funds, what they're actually used for, and to be able to adjust to actually service our community, not over police us, because even in the low numbers and the chokeholds, it's still policing the same population of community, no matter where you go. It's still overbearing on Black and Brown Indigenous folks. And so I'm looking at the very bottom of the barrel to all the excessive top and trying to make a balance out of that, if that makes sense at all. That's why I was pushing back on that to give my answer of, what is that?
I don't have an answer for you here. So.
Now you made it all color codes and numbers. I can't tell what I want to put on it. It's a, let me see. Let me read the question again. I can't see it on there. I'm trying to look at it over here.
Ross, can you talk about any of that? I mean, what our force looks like? I mean, I've lived here for 12 years and I haven't experienced personally or seen that type of situation happen in Kenmore. So I don't know if that has happened or occurred, or you can address Fernell's concerns. I think they're some of my concerns as well, but the 13 number seems low. So I'm just curious what the city's stance is on that.
Are you wondering about use of force or?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so in the last 5.5 years, we have used, just a second here, just double checking. Yeah, so from 2015 through mid 2020, we've had 59,647 dispatched calls for service. So let's just round that to 60,000 dispatched calls for service. During those 5.5 years, we have used use of force 15 times. So that's 0.0251% of incidents where use of force was used. Of those 15, we had, this is in percentage, but of the 15 uses of force, 7% was pepper spray, 13% was pointing a firearm, 20% was control hold or handcuffing, 27% was takedown or push, and 33%, so 1/3 was taser. So those are, yeah. And then the types of calls for those use of force, the biggest one was a fight or a disturbance at 33%. We had 20% of those 15 calls was domestic violence, 13% was a traffic stop. And then we had 7% of all the rest are about 7%. Shots fired, stolen vehicle, unknown circumstance, disorderly or hazard, and suicidal. So does that help?
And then does it break down to what race they are?
Yeah. So we had 70. So looking at Kenmore's population is about 74% white, non-Hispanic. And of the 15, 73% were white, 13% were Black, and 13% were Hispanic. So in other words, two people of the 15, 2 people were Black and 2 people were Hispanic. And I'm just looking at a report from the chief, and I have sort of details on the 2 that were Black. I don't have ones on the Hispanic.
Hey, Rob, I have 2 kind of more high-level questions.
Mm-hmm.
So number 1 is, I think some of the concern surrounding this topic is the experience of the minority and the minorities in the community actually reflected in those numbers, those use of force numbers. And so I guess, is there anything that the city has done to understand if these low numbers that are reported by the chief of police are actually representative of the experience of the citizens, of the citizens broadly, and those that see the police around their neighborhoods? And number two, from a militarization standpoint, I agree with Fernell that my concern about, giving a lot of hammers to the police is that everything looks like a nail. I don't know if that's necessarily the case in Kenmore, but I do like the idea of trying to de-escalate the weaponization. And so, do we have influence in King County, and is there anything that is being done specifically to influence the King County Sheriff's Department to kind of drive those conversations of lowering those kinds of weapons?
I'm not sure about the weapons part of it, but the training, the de-escalation training, and the implicit bias training is something that the King County Sheriff's Office is relatively aggressive on compared to a lot of other agencies. They certainly go above and beyond what's required by the state. As far as what weapons are used, I don't have any information on that.
Okay.
But what was your first question? Oh, does it reflect
the numbers that the chief has reported? Do you have any indication that that is not consistent with the experience of our citizens?
I don't have enough information on that to answer. I think we'd have to do a statistically valid survey with demographics to answer that.
Okay.
And from my survey of students, families, of the five Black and brown families who live here, four of us are in that scenario. Meaning the population being so low, we're still the ones that stand out. And just from the 30 years that I've been here, my father was one of the first ones to reach out and train the Lake Forest Park Police after incidents. Every male in my family, including my husband's sons, brothers, my own father, have been detained within a block of our home and neighborhood of being over policed. And so the students, after the 30 years of students, that it's still happening to their families and in campus. So I'm not only aware because of my own experience, but aware of what the survey would say because of the students I'm watching, the families I know, the way they are experiencing Kenmore and our neighboring towns, Bothell, Woodinville, all of that. So like I said, I wish I didn't know. I mean, but there's so few that those stories we know because that's how we all see that happening. And so that's why I'm just trying to make sure that we're not giving overhead to keep that, the policing. I want to focus more on that relationship and service instead of over policing. And so when we get into these budgets, I need to see what that looks like, because it just seems like, oh, here we go. And then that just brings a level of anxiety, uncertainty. And I appreciate that they're doing the training, but it's also ineffective because they're not getting to practice it on. We live in a white community. They're not getting to practice it. So hearing it, seeing it, knowing about it is not the same as being able to practice it and interact with different diversity in your community, since it's not very diverse here. So there's an element of their training only goes so far. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're not going too far on the other end. So I'm going to say a yes with conditions is my answer. What is that? What does that number come out to with Jeff?
So two is kind of a secondary priority.
Yeah. So I want to look at that a little deeper. Am I saying that the right number with what I'm articulating? Like, I don't want to. I just want to look a little deeper to get those resources balanced and keep on track with what those three goals were. James, you said at the beginning, not overstressing our already minoritized population. So,
I think what I tried to do is I tried to capture part of your comment, and of course,
is that okay? Thank you.
and
I
so
appreciate it.
so when we get this to the council, they'll see the numbers, but then they'll also be able to see our specific comments for specific things. So
Perfect. Thank you. That's all. I'm sorry to mean to spend so much time on that. I didn't get that email through, so I'm trying to keep up here.
worthwhile conversation.
One quick question, the numbers on the left, I think that's column D. Those are annual numbers, right?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that was my intention. If you see any that are biannual unintentionally, please let me know.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think along the same vein, I'm actually going to skip down to item 25, since this was discussed in the balancing act tool in a similar line, which is that the city is considering mental health service programs such as the radar or other mental health resources to supplement our police. So this would be in addition to the police. So this would actually be an addition of services as an option, which is why it's a negative $50,000 annual number. And so I got answers from Michael, Lynn, and Elizabeth on this, but Fernell, did you have any thoughts about whether we should prioritize this?
Yeah, hold on. I'm catching up. I think I want that 3 there as well. I'm not fine. I'm seeing 22. Wait, 22, 23. Oh, I don't have the latest updated version. I'm looking at an old one which does not have. Mine stops at 22. After that, other initiatives. Wait, sorry. I'm having a hard time reading it on your screen because it's small.
I'm sorry. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more.
25. Oh, there we go. Okay. Raise up a little bit there. Invest in programs like right. So yes.
Okay.
So that's a yes for me.
Did anybody else have comments on this one?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Let's go back up to the some of these other service level reductions.
That's a no for me. That 19. Are you on me? And then a no for that one. No. I have some comments about that, but we'll come back. Reduce street pavement. Nope. That's a 0. And reduce travel meetings console. I already said that one. That's a 2. I want considerations on that one. So that would be a 2. Yeah. So I talked about that before. Eliminate recreation coordinating. That would be a 2. I want considerations on that as well, because there's, again, the draw people here is important.
And Rob, one question on this one, on the eliminating coordination activities, would that be the laying off a person, the staff person?
Right.
Okay.
Can I give you some background on that? So our recreation model for Kenmore is where we rely on nonprofits and other groups to provide most of our recreation services. We're not, with a couple of exceptions like events, we're not in the business of directly providing recreation services. So like cities like Kirkland and I think even Bothell, they directly provide it. Like they have recreation coordinators that organize baseball leagues and basketball, all those things. We don't. We rely on nonprofits like North Lake Little League to make it happen. But what's happened is a lot of those programs and groups have grown and developed, like Kenmore Waterfront Activity Center down at the waterfront, things like that. And they use our facilities, and there's been a need for more staff involvement and coordinating all that and making it happen, even though the model hasn't changed. And so before our recreation started, the coordination of recreation activities was very dispersed throughout the organization. Like I was the point of contact with Kenmore Waterfront Association, Waterfront Activity Center, and Public Works upstairs was the point of contact with North Lake Little League, and somebody else was the point of contact with this group and somebody. And so your typical regular citizen didn't know who to call or who to go for. There was no central point of contact for rec services. So we brought the rec coordinator on at a halftime role for the purpose of being that one-stop shop, and also taking on that burden of coordinating all those roles. And it includes things like the kayak concession at Logboom Park and Skyhawk summer camp at Rhododendron Park and other things like that. Skate like a girl at the skate park. And if somebody wants to do a love note event at the hangar, they can now talk to our rec coordinator. So it's been really nice to have that person. A lot of her duties, I would say most of her duties are about helping youth. It's youth programs that she probably affects the most. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll add on to that, as well as being on the board at Kenmore Community Center. That's exactly what the focus was, is trying to pinpoint, coordinate all of the activities. And at one point, there's someone who does the artist in residence, or the theater portions, then some of the outdoor schools, Camp Roots, all of those. We were looking to get a rec center in Kenmore because of no space for youth to go unless you were in a Little League or, a program, sports specific program. But those kids who are not in there, there's not just free space or places to hang out in Kenmore. And so we were really looking at focusing in on that. So that coordinator position and coordinating with, people who are coordinating the youth around the area and your local, PE teachers, that was really important to us, to have a point person to go to share, here's all the other activities that are going on. And so that was just building and getting solid. So I'd support that.
That's a really good point, Fernell. The connection with the school that the rec coordinator's been able to achieve is pretty great.
I've been trying to do that for years, so I need help.
Yeah, she's actually grown some new programs. So if this person's eliminated, a lot of those programs that she's been able to coordinate may not be able to continue to be coordinated, and a lot of the long-standing existing programs would then just get dispersed back and absorbed back into the organization. So for example, I would probably once again be the point of contact for Kenmore Waterfront Association. The Little League would probably start, talk to somebody up in Public Works, and Skyhawks would talk to our events coordinator in city manager's office. And so it would be dispersed again if this position was eliminated.
Yeah, and in Woodinville and Bothell, they have rec centers to do those kind of,
So based on this, I'm going to go to a 1 as a last resort.
I think it's a very efficient use of dollars for the recreation benefit to get nonprofits engaged and planned. So
and
I see
mine is a 1 too at last result. Don't cut that one.
Okay. I saw Anthony joined.
Yes, he was just good. He's joined. He was texting me, so I think he's.
Yeah. Hey. Sorry, everybody. I missed the start time. Then I had a bedtime negotiation to handle before jumping into this. So I've been listening for the last couple of minutes, but really sorry about missing the start.
Anthony, just to get you up to speed quickly, we shifted from the binary yes/no system to a more ranked, and you can see I added a scoring here. So 3 would be the biggest one we want to pursue as a priority, down to 0, do not pursue. So really quickly, we talked about all of these a little bit. Can you give me your personal scores and any comments that you have on these different service level reductions that we didn't talk about yesterday?
Sure. I think I agree with the group on 19A as something that we shouldn't pursue. There should be better ways to find it.
Jeff, you missed mine there too. Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Hold on? I have to change my, there we go. I was blocking the notes with everybody's face. Yeah, I think they're reducing the police services by 20% is definitely a 2 for me. I think there's more, and again, this is like part of the task force that makes it hard is like this whole issue is heavy and complicated. Like, like Rob says, there's, staffing minimums and things like that to consider to where we could actually make an impact. I wouldn't want to reduce parks and facilities maintenance by 20%, but I would consider that as a last resort. I think if we're talking about like the stability of the city, there are things that are essential, right? And we should prioritize them above facilities maintenance, but hopefully we can come to a different agreement. I think that looking at staffing and expenditures in the city manager's office, I would pursue as a last resort as well. Reduce street pavement standards, eliminate the transfer from the general fund. And I think I would agree with Jeff and Elizabeth when they laid that out yesterday. I could mark that as a 0. Travel, meeting, and consulting contracts. I mean, I think that's one of the first things that we should probably look at. So maybe a 2 there, just depending on how critical they are to the operations of city government. And then I think I caught the end of the recreation coordination activities, but it sounds like the group feels strongly that that's, Jeff, you said, was a pretty efficient use of everyone's space or of the funds.
That's my view, yeah.
Me too.
Inclined to agree with the group on that as well.
Okay. So we'll put you down for 1.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Just jump in to say that it's 7:21.
Right. I think as we go along, I just want to make sure everybody's mindful. If it's looking like we are, if it's looking like we're coming to a consensus for a strong no or a strong priority, then we don't necessarily need to tease out the nuances. If you want to add some comments later, I can make the document available and you can add additional flavor to your comments that we can provide to the city council, but I want to make sure that we're using this time to try to reach consensus on items so that we can actually have something to give to the council. So let's move on to these other initiatives. There's a little bit of confusion on this. I put 0 because we could choose to increase affordable housing funding or decrease it from the 160. So I think I'll just leave it. I'll just open it up. Does anybody have strong feelings one way or the other to increase or decrease? We could change this to be an increase or a decrease number and then kind of talk about.
I have a question on that in terms of building permits that the city issues. Is there any requirement for a percentage of units to be built that are slated for low income or affordable housing, or is it up to the builder to do that, to offer that?
Just your normal straight over tackle building project, the answer is no. However, there are opportunities for affordable housing. For example, we have along Bothell Way on the north side between 73rd and 80th. We have what we call a transportation district overlay, or a transportation oriented district overlay, a TOD overlay. And what it is a developer could come and just build the normal density of housing that's allowed in the underlying zoning. Or if they want to go higher and have more density and build more units, they can, but then they have to have some affordable units. So it's not mandatory, but if they want to go higher and have more density, then they have to have a certain percentage of affordable units when they build. In the past, the city is, in one project, the city has offered a multifamily tax exemption tool, which is available under state law, and that is, and this is totally voluntary on the city, but as an incentive to build more multifamily housing and affordable housing to go with it, cities can offer a tax exemption for up to 8 or 12 years, depending on the affordability level. And the city has chosen only to do that once, and that was the first project to get off the ground for Kenmore Village, which we know as Spencer 68. So it's all been voluntary. That's the short answer.
Okay.
So I'd want to see the equity tool used over the top of all of that, because since the answer is only once, that's not equitable. So I'd want to to have the pandemic and the surplus to be considered. Again, we're talking about serving the people who live here, and so considerations and equity need to be applied in that same way. So I'd want to push back on just letting it be up to, well, if they want to and if they volunteer and they can't. That doesn't sound like, that sounds like the okey doke to me. So let's what answer would help push that in the direction of equity, whatever number that would be.
So for now, I think the question is, because we can submit the comment that says that the decisions that the council makes regarding affordable housing, we as citizens want them to use that equity tool. But then, as the financial sustainability task force, do we think that it is worth, given the financial situation that we are in, do we think that we should make it a priority to increase the funding for affordable housing in order to better achieve those goals?
And I guess I don't have the background or didn't get a chance to read or understand or learn about that more. Like, how much have we done already to help those who are being pushed out of homes and rent and all? I know I've read a little bit about Kenmore Council extending rent and all, but I'm not sure I understand enough of what has happened in the past and how to go that forward. So if I could use some help on that answer. Yeah.
Rob's got his hand up. Maybe he wants to help you.
Just a couple things. Yeah, the city council's made affordable housing a priority over the years. And one thing they recently did is they put in what again, I'm using the overlay term, but they did an overlay on all the mobile home parks in our city, requiring them to stay that way. We actually made the front page of the Seattle Times when we did that. The two of the property owners are suing us and don't want that ordinance to become valid, and we're defending that. But one thing I'd like to tell you about where this money goes, like this 160 for affordable housing, what is that used for? Well, it's used for two things. One is our annual membership dues in an organization called ARCH, and that stands for a Regional Coalition for Housing. And that's a group of East Side cities that all get together to try to make affordable housing happen, including pushing policy at the state, county, and city level, but also actually putting our money where our mouth is and actually buying up property and turning it into affordable housing. So the most of that 160,000, a portion of the 160 goes to dues to ARCH, and then most of it, and I wish I should have come prepared with the numbers, but most of it goes into an affordable housing trust fund, which ARCH manages. And that affordable housing trust fund goes into a pool made up of those East Side cities. And then what ARCH does is every year they decide as a group where to put this trust fund pool of money and actually building actual affordable units. And Kenmore has benefited from that ARCH trust fund money over the years. Not recently, not since I've been here, but I know that there's several projects here close to City Hall that have affordable units that were in part funded by Arch Trust Fund money. So.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to touch it. I think that's a wish list thing. I hope the council considers including that in future budgets. But
Yes.
Joanne, did you want to add something too?
Wanted to clarify because I know these are annual numbers, that the 160 is a 2-year number. So it would really be half of that. And then of the 80, half of that is the capital contribution that Rob was just referring to that goes into the trust fund. And the other, about $39,000 is just the cost of our participation in that agency. And in this last budget, in fact, the council made a greater contribution to that trust fund than they had in years past.
great.
Yeah, I agree with the group here.
So do zeros mean just keep it the way it is?
Yeah, so that would just mean, yeah, I guess zero just means it's
Touch it.
since we put 0 here, then it has no impact regardless. We could put 3 here, but the financial impact would be nothing. So so yeah, we can make that clear in the notes.
And I'm also a 0 for climate change and a 3 for the HR FTE.
Okay, sorry. Elizabeth, did you say 0 for this? No
Yeah.
change?
And then 3 for the HR FTE.
Okay. And for now, did you have any
For the for the HR FTE, a 3 with side note of again, equity oversight on that and hiring, and I have lots of notes for that, but that's for a later conversation. It's not going to change the answer. I'm in favor of it, but let's do it without. Yeah. Okay. I'll explain later.
Yeah, like I said, I've made this available so you can go in and edit your own comments and flesh it out as much as you want. And I think that would be great to give to the council. Okay.
Some additional information on climate change. The city council has put climate action plan in their top 5 city council goals. I believe it's council goal number 3. They do rank order them. They've already given us the green light to calculate our greenhouse gas emissions for both the community and the city organization. And so we brought on a consultant to help us take that full inventory and start the process of getting those greenhouse gas emissions calculated. That's phase 1 of a several phase plan to get going on a climate action plan. The real heavy lifting comes in the implementation of the plan and making it all work. And I believe that in order to really do all that and coordinate it all, both with the community and the organization, we would need about a half-time FTE.
What would that be from a dollar standpoint on an annual basis, would you estimate?
I'd probably give it about the same value as the recreation coordinator, whatever we have that as a half-time FTE.
Okay.
50K.
So for Nell and Anthony, do you think that we should make this a priority to include in the plan?
I'm agreeing with that in the group.
Not a priority given the current circumstances.
Yeah, I would agree with the group. And I think on the affordable housing and the climate change initiative, like given Rob's input, it sounds like there's already investigations underway. I don't think in a like budget crunch focused initiative that we should be trying to prioritize like extra things, especially things that are underway. Like how much can we accomplish with what the city council is already investigating, right? Like, let's wait and see those results. That may take another year. I don't think it's something that I would want to prioritize out of this initiative.
Yeah, and we think we can get the greenhouse gas inventory done by end of this year, first part of next year, like January of next year.
Great.
But again, we would need resources. Once we got the greenhouse gas inventory complete, we would need resources to reach out to the community, get the plan developed, and then implement the plan. And that's where the halftime FTE would come in.
And Anthony, on the radar mental health services, so this would be an increased staff that would work with the police on specifically on mental health type emergency calls.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I don't have the votes either way here as the last one to chime in, but this looks like to me a great nomination for some of the other replacements that we're making here. Like, I think there's a school resource officer on the list that we went over last night. I think there's a tremendous more amount of community value in this position than that. And that, I think that was an even swap from a dollar standpoint.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then the HR position that Rob has discussed, the need for an additional HR person.
Yeah, it looks like the group thinks this is a priority. I would consider this as a 2 myself, but
okay. And Michael, did you?
Disagreeing.
I don't think I have a number for you on this one. Did you want to chime in? I think you're on mute.
There we go. Yes. Actually, I've gone through and changed some of the numbers you put in, Jeff, based upon the new scaling system. And how about, do you want me to just send all those to you, or do you want maybe at the end I could just go down my list after you've gotten responses from everybody else? I think I could go through it pretty quickly there rather than on each one.
Yeah, what if you've got them handy, then I can type them in quickly.
Okay, you want that now or later?
Well, so this is the last one, so I think it'll be a good refresher to kind of go top to bottom anyway and see where we're ending up. So why don't we do it now?
Okay.
And as I'm scrolling through, everybody kind of look through and see which ones the group has started to kind of come to a consensus on, and we can talk about anything that we think may not be hitting where it should.
Great. So under expenditure number 4, I'm a 2. Okay. Just below it, 5, I'm a 2. Number 6, I'm a 2. 7, I'm a 2.
Okay.
Skipping down to service level reductions, 19D, I'm a 2. And those are my changes.
Okay, excellent. That was quick.
I thought so. That's why I didn't want to interrupt you before. I thought it was easier just to quickly give them to all of you at once.
I don't know if I got the HR. Where did you land on the HR position?
No change.
Oh, sorry, I don't have. It's blank for me. What number do you have?
Oh, hang on one sec. I have to go to a different document here. What number is that?
The rest of the group has done 3s, except for Anthony has a 2.
No,
so
I meant the line number.
What number?
Item number?
26.
26.
If you have an old version, this is one of the items that I added.
Okay. I don't have that on my list. So just remind me what it is.
So Rob has stated that Joanne is wearing 3 hats right now. She's wearing the financial director hat, the HR hat, and the IT hat. And this would this would take off the HR duties from Joanne, as well as, I can't remember what the DEI stands for, but I think it's an equity view. Rob,
Yeah.
do you want
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
to? There we go.
I'm a 2.
Okay, excellent. So, so there we have it. I think we have answers from everybody on all the items that we have here. And so you can see where we are. Sorry, I should have asked. I assumed this because we had talked about this at meetings before, but I should confirm. I should not assume that this is your answer. But this is the additional street funding that we've talked about, where if we want to maintain the level of if we want to maintain the functionality of our roads at their current state, we need an additional funding of $1 million a year to maintain them at their current level. And so by including this line, we are saying that we need to increase funding to compensate for that additional expense. Yeah, let me know where does everybody land on the additional street funding to maintain our roads at their current state.
No change for me.
Mike?
I'm a 3.
Okay. And for now?
No change.
Okay. And Anthony?
No change.
Okay, great. Okay, so that means that we can look at where we are. So right now,
I think you're missing a couple for item 7. Jeff.
7. Oh, that's right. We skipped this one because it was a low impact and a low success. So, so thanks for pointing out. We'll get this for completeness. So this one is for the proposal to get requests for proposals to potentially contract for fleet maintenance as opposed to doing it ourselves. So this is potentially we could find. Yeah, go ahead.
City's already doing it with the utility district. It would just be to look at for options of being able to reduce the cost.
Thanks.
Yep.
So for now, did you have a thought on here?
I don't have much thought on that one. I'll go ahead and defer to the group on that one. I think yeah, a 0. I think I'm okay with that. I don't have any big, I'm trying to read the notes quick, but it's okay.
Same.
Okay. Okay, great. So, so right now we're taking the average, the rounded average of our scores, and I'm just looking at those that rounded up to a 3. We actually meet and exceed the funding goal to
provide fiscal sustainability.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So let me find this one. So this is what it looks like right now. The model with our chosen 3s. And some of these, as you can see, are phased in at a later year, which is why you see the deficit in the next couple of years, based on the phasing of these proposals and the state of the pandemic and the impact we expect that to have on these years. But in the out years, you can see where the budget strategies end up in that surplus.
Are the years based, is that your recommendation, Steve, what you put together for timing?
I think that was the starting point of those, but it's completely up to the committee in terms of, trying to figure out, okay, what is the timing and what's the phase-in period?
Okay. And then from the city's perspective, for Rob and Joanne on these initial, in the immediate future into 2022 with the deficit, will we get by once with the phased rollout plan, or do we need to account for trying to break even on those for next year in 2022?
Okay, so I need to catch up here a little bit. So what we're seeing now is the committee's 3s implemented.
Yeah, so what this does is this looks and it takes the average
Right.
of the scores and rounds it. And for each one that has a 3, it puts an X in Steve's model.
Okay, so those two sheets are linked. Okay.
They are linked, yes.
Got
And you
it.
can see the link here to that other sheet.
Got it.
Um,
Wow, you guys are sophisticated. I love this.
That's sophisticated, we think.
The graph that I'm seeing there is actually your scenarios plugged in and therefore showing a surplus in 26 and 27
yeah, that's right.
based on these. And have you gone over which years you plan to implement these?
So we have not gone over the years. These are the initial years provided by Steve with some of these. So I had to add these other categories down here. These were not included, so I added them myself, and I just put them in at the default. With I think the street funding was the only one that I changed to be out 1 year, because if we put this in 21, then it looks it's pretty extreme. Yeah, so I thought we might be able to delete
Red bars.
that. Sorry.
Jeff, Jeff, can you reshare your screen? I lost it somehow, so I'm not seeing it. I'm only seeing our little thumbnail picture. Does anybody else have any trouble seeing? I don't know where it went.
That might be a setting on your Zoom for now.
Yeah, I still got it.
See it, so you may need to, if you're looking at the people, there's like a little square with another square to the right. I think that would switch it.
Okay.
Did that fix it?
And it's still really small. How can I make that bigger?
There should be an option to go full screen. Here, let's see. It looks like a square with the pieces missing in the middle of each side. That fix it?
Well, I'm seeing this share screen, but it's very tiny. So I'm gonna pull it open. Okay, if I pull it open, maybe that will.
While you are discussing that, I just want to double check that that my formulas are working correctly and that all of these are being represented correctly. So, Jill. Tax, user fee study, and mental health. Yep. Okay. Okay. It looks like they are syncing correctly. I just wanted to make sure.
Of course they are, Jeff.
You know, when you do things live, you just invite gremlins to come and mess everything up. So, just wanted to check. Okay. So I think that we can just work off this sheet. And if there's anything that is not highlighted in this peach color that you think that we should include in our proposed scenario, then we can kind of go and take a look at the individual matrix and see how close we are, or if we want to change some scores. So, but we'll focus on the peach colored things for now, and focus on the phasing and the timing and things like that. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yep.
Okay.
Back. I'm good now.
Great. Okay, so if everybody can see, so let's start with the SRO program. So this is the school officer, a school resource officer. This we expect would happen in 2021 with no delayed phasing, which is appropriate because I don't think that they are there now, and so just wouldn't go forward. Any other comments on that? So for the alternative jail provider, this is one that has a low success factor. So I think it's appropriate that we give the city ample time, give the city of Kirkland time to give Rob a couple years to keep pestering Kirkland for use of their jail, or continue to pursue other options. So I think phasing this out a few years is definitely appropriate. Does anybody have any opinions to move it one way or the other, further out or closer? Okay.
I think you can go on.
Okay, so now we're going through some of these. These three here. So just to level set, the electric and gas and the water did not meet that 3 threshold, but we did meet the threshold on cable, phone, and solid waste for utility taxes. So right now, the model is putting them in starting in 2026. My thought would be that we should put these in earlier. I think that cable and phones are a luxury item. I don't think that we're going to be putting too many people out of place by increasing the cost to cable TV and phone.
The percentage increase on those, was it a 2%?
I got it. It was 6% for cable and 6% for solid waste. What was the other one?
Phone.
Phone.
Phone would go from 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Which basically would put you on par median with all the other agencies in each of those areas.
So I would be happy to put cable as 2021.
Yeah.
Phone maybe the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hesitating a bit on that. Still waiting for families, students to even get, I still have kids doing their whole homework, phone, everything on their phone, papers, they're just still operating like that. Is that, maybe I'm thinking of.
So this is that we cannot tax the internet, the data portion. So so any internet connection data would not be taxed.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I'm thinking of that in a different way. Thank you for clarifying.
This would just be voice.
Like, wait a minute, I just was at school passing out all that equipment today and just looking at hand over how many are just don't even have it.
Now, I mean, you know, if to have a cell phone, most cell carriers require you to have a voice and text plan before you can get a data plan. So this would increase the costs associated with a phone, but the increased data usage as a result of the pandemic and working from home would not be impacted here.
Jeff, there's going to be one correction you got to make here, because on the phone one, the city's already at 6%, and so in every scenario, it's going to be a 0 impact.
Yeah. It's
okay.
So
gas and electric.
that's 0, and whether you say yes or no, it doesn't matter because that's what the city already is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misinterpreted the report.
Yeah, it picked up. You picked up the existing revenue, which is what they currently have. So.
Okay. So in that case, we need to set this to 0. Okay. Thank you for catching that error.
Yeah. In that case, unfortunately, you still have some more work to do.
Okay.
Can I just weigh in here? Just again, this is your decision, not mine, but you may just want to be hesitant about enacting any new taxes during this pandemic. Even a small increase in the cable bill might be hard for people to swallow right now when they're pinching pennies as hard as they can. Just a thought, but you guys do what you want.
And for the committee's sake on that note, what some agencies have done is they've decided to do a phase-in approach. So if the city were to introduce a new tax, they might ramp it up. You're looking at 6% here. If you did it over 3 years, you could do 2, 4, and 6. So it's just, you know, as an example and for your consideration about what other agencies have done. Doesn't mean you're necessarily recommending that, but I just wanted to indicate that.
And when does the fiscal year start for the city? Is that January 1 or is
Jan
it
1?
January 1.
Great.
And the pandemic's going to be going well into 2021.
Yeah.
So 22 might be a better year to look at that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, because I agree, 2022.
And would we want to do, given that it's 6%, would we want to do a phase in of 3% a year for 2 years, or?
I like that approach.
I agree. I think that makes sense.
And that growth factor of 0 that Jeff has in there, by the way, is probably close. I mean, we're starting to see, you know, the as Rob was saying last night, the cut the cord, you know, trend that's going on. But surprisingly enough, what's happening, I think, is that as people are cutting the cord, for whatever reason, the cable providers are still increasing the rates. So there's a little bit of an offset that's going on right now, but I think long
We
term,
really haven't seen a decline in those revenues.
right. So long term,
Yet.
you know, if you enact it, you know, don't expect it to grow much. So,
Right.
no.
It's pretty flat now.
In solid waste, we have here starting at 2026, which I think would be, it's pretty far out there, but maybe appropriate. Anybody have any particular thoughts on the timing there?
I mean,
One way or the
maybe
other?
the phased approach as well, and maybe starting that in like 24, perhaps, and phase it in over the course of a few years.
We started a little bit earlier, but phase it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rob, can you remind the committee in terms of any franchise fees that are currently on solid waste?
0.
Okay, and then photo traffic enforcement. So I think that there's both a component of thinking about when the community would oppose, you know, doing it too early, doing it during the pandemic, would, you know, how the community would respond, be with reduced traffic during the pandemic, how much of an impact it would have in the earlier years anyway, and then see how long it would actually take to implement such a, you know, to actually get the cameras installed and get the contractors engaged and things like that. So
I'm fine with that.
Is this assuming 2 cameras? It's assuming 1?
That was one.
That's high for one.
Yeah.
No, it's more than that.
Really?
I thought it was
Be-
net for
is
one.
this 3 cameras?
3. It's
Oh,
Okay, so that's 3 cameras.
Okay, so I guess we should start there. How many cameras do we think? So we talked yesterday about, and there seemed to be consensus about the intersection of 522 and 61st. Rob, can you give us any insight about what other intersections are being contemplated for cameras?
Elementary school zones, so Kenmore Elementary on 73rd, Arrowhead on Juanita Drive, and then Morelands, not sure if that would be on 155th or 84th. And what am I missing? Did I get all the elementary schools?
Lockwood?
Lockwood's not in our city.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so is it only 3 elementary schools? Why do I think there's 4? Okay, yeah, so Morelands, Kenmore, and Arrowhead would be those school zones. And then also another thought is to do one on 80, a red light camera on 80th and Bothell Way. So at the other end of the city. So kind of bookending Bothell Way. 80th or 83rd, one of those two at the east end of Bothell Way.
And I'm inclined to say 1 and see how it goes.
yeah.
I'm inclined with that too on 68th. 68th.
Or 68th or 61st?
First, 61st, sorry. The Arrowhead, Inglemore, Morelands traffic is a morning issue, not all day. It's a get to school, to hurry up, that whole thing. Don't even start me on that traffic that I'm in right now. So, but yeah, 61st is more of an issue than just morning late to school traffic.
So I have a question with this. In the balancing act tool, and maybe I misread it, I thought it was only one camera as an option. And so I feel like that was where that 1.7 number came from, was for one.
No, the 1.7 million was based on 3 cameras.
Okay, I guess I missed.
In the balancing act, it was 1.3 million over the biennium,
Okay.
1 camera. So each camera net would be 670 approximately.
Okay.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit different.
It's close. It's close for 1 camera for 1 year.
So it's probably a higher number for that first camera.
Maybe so. Depends on where it goes.
I think the 1.7 was really a gross number, not a net number.
Yeah,
I
it's a net
remember by
number.
reading. I think that's what we've got in here
It's a
right
net-
now. So 700,000 sounds like the net number. What I was thinking on this is, given that the primary reason behind this is traffic safety, and during the pandemic, we don't expect there to be that much volume. And really what we're doing is, these are traffic fines. I would argue for starting this earlier.
Well,
Is that even possible though? To get it done?
What's the earliest that we could get this implemented?
2022 is the earliest you can get it done.
Okay.
There's a lot.
process.
Yeah, there's a lot of process, community engagement, doing an RFP with the different vendors and getting the equipment installed and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
2020 might even be fast. I'm not sure.
Not to say you couldn't sprinkle them out over time if you wanted to do 3.
Yeah, but to Mike's point, do we know what the break-even point is? Like, let's say we get it installed Q2 2022, traffic returns to normal. It's not like a heavy investment, like financially, right? It's the fact that it's like a big process. You have to get a lot of approvals, Rob. In terms of the amount of revenue that it can bring in, it's not like building something expensive.
The cost of the equipment is and the enforcement, the other enforcement costs are roughly about 1/3, and I'd say much of that is considered a fixed cost, and so
Okay.
So the number that you're seeing there, that 650, would be assuming about $1 million in fines a year, and about 350K in enforcement costs, much of which will be considered fixed for the most part. There's a
Every year?
variable as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we have more work to do then.
If we're limiting it to
on this grass now.
we're limiting it to 1 camera, then what this is saying is that we've reached consensus on 1 camera, that we would want it as early as possible, sometime in 2022, and we're giving us some room on the timing. This would be a phased approach, so this would say that we would have it starting about midway through 2022. We could extend that phasing more, or we could push it out to 2023 if we want. But this is kind of our optimistic view.
I guess now, I mean, with taking the schools into consideration, I don't know. I mean, my kids go to Kenmore Elementary and people fly down 73rd. So, and I'm not sure how Arrowhead is.
Same.
But yeah, I mean, I don't let my kids walk to school because of the cars. So
there's no walking. That's just death road for what nobody gets to walk anywhere on Simons. Yeah.
On
one
so I guess if they're being direct, if there's 1 on 522 and then 2 for schools, I'm more inclined to go for all 3. If they're in school zones, because that would definitely slow the traffic down and make it safer for our kids to be walking to school.
Swear.
I think I would trust Elizabeth and Fernell on this. My kids are not in elementary school, and so So I haven't been driving over there or conscientious of that. So I'm inclined to agree with you if that's your experience and you think I'd be happy to jump on board.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that there's one on 522 and then Kenmore Elementary, and I think probably Arrowhead would be my other one. Morelands, I feel like, is a little bit different. I don't feel like it's quite as traffic heavy as Arrowhead and Kenmore.
The deaths on that road for Arrowhead there, that's in 1 year are, Morelands is different. Arrowhead is the bigger issue.
So Mike and Anthony, are you still thinking one camera, or given the context, would you be interested in 2 or maybe even 3?
I'm definitely okay with 3. I use Arrowhead. I live here in Arrowhead, and the experience on that road, it can be quite frightening at the beginning and end of the day.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with everybody's very, very specific examples. And also it's something that hopefully can live on as a revenue stream. And I think we're right now a little bit light on those.
Is there a way in our report to specifically recommend placement on those? I mean, obviously the community has to be involved in that, but I now that I've learned more tonight about it specifically, I think perhaps other people would feel differently about it as well.
We will absolutely add a note here.
I would second that. Add a note if if we're going to get 3, we want input on exactly where and why, and Elizabeth and I will show you exactly where. So you need to listen to us. We'll show you.
You can walk with us to school when we go back.
My girls will be going to elementary school soon enough, so
you don't want them to. You don't want them to be on that road then. So help us out.
My friends, as you're about to move to the next one, I want to compliment you for doing a great job and just point out that it's 8:06.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. And on 73rd.
Yeah, at Kenmore Elementary.
And on Arrowhead.
Juanita Drive near Arrowhead. Yeah.
Okay.
My city traffic engineer is going to be excited. He's been advocating for this.
Okay, less red. Hey.
Yeah, there's a lot of red there for a second. I think we came to a good option. I feel good about that we're making the decision based on public safety and not for budget reasons. But using that to fund our roads. Okay. All right. So now we're moving into the property tax. This is excising the banked capacity. And everybody was pretty unanimous on this. This is one that I would probably be in favor of pushing out. 2023 seems reasonable. And then this is also phased over 3 years. So it would start in 2023, but they would use that banked capacity over 3 years. Is how it is in the model now.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Mike,
agree with the phased-in approach. Looking at the red on our graph, though, I'm wondering if we might want to start that phase-in earlier.
I wonder if we phase in the admissions tax earlier. I mean, I know it's a little bit less, But maybe the property tax in 2022, I feel like that's something that the pandemic needs to be done before we increase property taxes on folks based on current economics for a lot of folks right now.
Yeah, I agree with Elizabeth. I think anything that is not fixed, that is sort of like action generated, like that, over the property tax, because I also would like to make sure that the council and the state and everyone has time to find the right property tax amount, what we can do for, like, you know, homes of certain values and things like that. So it seems like a more involved process as well. So a later phase on that might be better. Also gives people a chance to think about whether or not they want to stay here, et cetera.
I think I'm on board with 2023. I think giving a couple years to recover, and this doesn't mean that we're not going to raise the rate for those years necessarily. This is just when we start using the banked capacity, right?
Oh.
So
What that translates to, just so you know, again, is that it raises the amount of tax that the city will collect, and that 400,000 right now is equivalent to what, Joanne, about 10%, right, of your existing levy. And so by virtue of implementing it over 3 years, in essence, it's basically saying it's about just north of 3% per year you're going to be increasing the total tax levy. And then, of course, that gets allocated based on assessed valuation. The other component you have to think about is that the model, the baseline forecast assumes that council will implement the 1% per year as well. So this would be 1% per year, plus adding the bank capacity. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Right.
Can I add to that? That
yes,
right now, our levy rate that results from the levy we're approving each year is very low because assessed values have been climbing. And they still are, even in this epidemic. Assessed valuations are going up. So you'll see that the levy rate will continue to drop as that happens. So when you add in another 1 or 2%, it's not felt very, very significantly because the rate is dropping anyway. So it doesn't really raise your taxes per se. It might raise the taxes on a really expensive piece of property, but generally when assessed valuations are going up and the levy rate's dropping, kind of tends to be the best time to tack on another 1 or 2%. So I'll just make that observation.
That makes sense.
For that.
yeah. So, but I think to summarize, you know, if we in our proposed scenario, if we tell the council it's okay to raise that 1%, you know, each year, you know, continue to do it through 2021 and 2022, but delay the banked capacity increase until 2023, and then phase that in over 3 years. I think that is a pretty good balanced approach where we're not completely foregoing all property tax increases during this time, but the using the banked capacity, delaying that increase until later, it would be appropriate. Is everybody on board kind of with that understanding and that position?
Make a comment before we move on with this. Just
Please.
want to remind people that property taxes is probably one of the least regressive form of tax we have in our options. That you're
Yep.
taxing wealth, and we're going to have to cut. We're going to have to increase a revenue somewhere. If we don't do it here, where? And is that going to be a more or less a regressive choice? So we can move on from here, but I think we might want to come back by the time we get done if we don't see those reds change, and if we end up making choices on particularly tax options that may be more regressive and have a bigger impact on low income or lower income than a property tax would.
That's a great point, Mike. I want to clarify for the group. I was operating under the assumption that we would be okay with 1 or 2 years of a reasonable deficit, given that the city does have that rainy day fund. So maybe we open that for discussion, and maybe get some input from Rob. How much of a deficit are we comfortable with in the next 2 years, in 2021 and 2022, using the rainy day fund, and how should that impact our decisions?
Yeah, so Joanne, correct me here, but I think we have in the neighborhood of about $9 or $10 million of reserves. That includes general fund, strategic opportunities fund, strategic reserve, rainy day fund, and then street fund balance. And so for you to eat up $1 million of that 9 or 10 million is probably not going to be the end of the world. Wouldn't want to do that for too long, but I think am I okay with that? I'm not necessarily okay with it. Could I live with it? Yes.
Well, I would say our reserves are really, 9's kind of pushing it. I think maybe 8 when you count what is in our operations plus our 2 other funds.
Don't forget street fund. We have a fund balance there too.
I haven't.
How much is in just the rainy day fund? The fund that was set aside for a rainy day, and it's raining today.
1.4.
1.4. So here we're projecting 1 million over the next 2 years. So that would use up, most of the rainy day fund, quote unquote.
Right.
Which it's always sad to use your savings and you have to build that savings back up.
Mm-hmm.
But that is what it's there for. So
right. I guess I'm comfortable with a deficit, and I'm comfortable with using some of that fund. I guess the 700,000 is a little out of my comfort zone. Maybe $500,000, 400,000 would be.
Just
Can we see what it looks like, Jeff, if you changed it to 2022, just how that would change the numbers for property tax?
Elizabeth, it's become kind of hard to hear you.
Oh, I had to put my earbuds in because my kids are getting ready for bed, so they'll be like screaming soon. So sorry. I'll try to turn myself up a little bit.
So by changing it to 2022, it doesn't affect 2021, but it does reduce 2022.
Okay, about 100,000. Okay.
And let's just make sure we're all singing from the same page in terms of the second graph that's on the right-hand side, which is the reserve level. Those reserves that start at 3.8 million, Joanne, remind us again, does that include the rainy day fund or not? It doesn't, right? That's the unassigned, unencumbered, if you will, reserves that the city has in the general fund. It does not include the rainy day fund. It does not include the strategic opportunities fund. And so by virtue of what you're seeing in this graph right now, with the solutions that you've identified, those reserves that do not include rainy day, et cetera, would be drawn down to just about where the reserve goal is, which is 20% of annual operating expenditures, basically. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because it was covered up by all of the panelists. So yeah, that's a really good point, Steve.
And so when we try to model these, what we try to do is 2 things. Is we try to make sure that, number 1, that the reserves are staying at or near that reserve goal in every one of the years. And again, or near, and in some cases you might need to let it dip a little bit below, like you're showing right now. The second is that with respect to the top graph, in terms of what that fiscal gap is, you want to try to make sure that that ends up being above 0 clearly by the time that we hit the final year. Now, what you see here is how it's reducing. It's going from 9 to 6 to 2. That's because the revenue sources that we've got applied here, this 1.7 in particular, the traffic photo traffic enforcement, it's not assuming right now that there's going to be any potential really growth of those revenues over time. We held that flat line in terms of the assumption. And so here you go, you've got the same issue that we had before, right? Where you've got, you know, property taxes that are only be able to grow by 1%. You've got now this photo enforcement here and all the other things that we've got. And yet we're assuming, again, our expenditures are going to grow by about 2.5% to 3% per year. So that's why you're still seeing that little bit of a bleed. So the city will be able to deal with, you know, fiscal sustainability throughout the years that we're looking at here through 2027. But because of that decline that we're seeing in terms of the gap, the reserve, the surplus, if you will, the surplus, not reserve, the surplus, it's not as flat as it would ideally want to be by 2027. So the city might need to look after 2027 at some additional enhancements at that time. I know we're thinking 6 or 7 years out and a lot could change, and I get that.
Well, and I would, you know, my suggestion would be that every budget period we look at this and we push it out 2 more years and see. That's what we've consistently done with our 6-year forecast.
Yeah.
It's not just once and done.
I have one more thought on 2021 is, you know, for the pandemic for 2020, we cut about $1 million worth of things. Steve in his forecast assumes that 300,000 of that stay cut. I could probably push it administratively and you know, have more than the 300,000 cut. We're going through the budget process now, but for 2021, I could probably keep that kind of extreme belt tightening through 2021 and cut more than 300,000 in 2021 just through the administrative things.
Joanne or Steve or Rob, can you explain how the fiscal gap basically flattens in 2027, but the general fund reserves continue to grow after 2023? Can you explain how that works?
You're
on mute. What am I doing? Okay, so what's happening is that based on the selection of strategies that you've got, you're actually adding to the reserves.
Okay.
And so in 23, 24, and 25, you're adding 700,000, 900,000, 600,000 in each of those years. And that's why your reserves are growing. The size of the piggy bank is expanding.
So there's a net 0.9 here. That's why it goes from 3.3 to 4.2. Is this 9 here gets added to this 3.3 to get to the 4.2.
Oh, that's quite flat.
But yeah, so this 5, since we don't have a surplus in 27, it stays flat. And presumably, if expenses continue to go up but our revenues stay flat, then it would be red in 28 and it would go down again in 28.
Okay.
Correct.
So to use a private enterprise, Elizabeth,
yep.
the top is net income, the bottom is shareholder equity.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding everything.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So let's finish out the timing and then for the items that we have, and then let's have a discussion on this declining surplus and maybe talk about some of these other items that have more potential for growth over time. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the banked capacity, admissions tax. So right now this is out into 2027. We could definitely pull this forward.
Sooner.
What do you think?
22, 23. I think 2027 is a long time.
Yes.
Does 23 sound reasonable for everyone, or Elizabeth wanted it in 22? So
I can go either way. 2022 or 23 is fine with me.
Okay, I will leave it at 23.
Okay.
Okay, and this user fee study, I think this one, I think they need a little bit of time to do the study and implement it. So 22 might seems a little aggressive to me.
I think it's doable.
Okay. Anybody have comments on?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And then we didn't select. None of these service reductions or these other revenue items met our 3 threshold. But let's talk about these others. We pushed the street funding out to 2022. The radar health. Let's go these one at a time. Radar mental health. When would we anticipate that the city would engage?
I mean, we'd want to try to get it as soon as possible. We'd have to negotiate with the county and that sort of thing. I'd keep it 2021, but do a 2 on phase in.
Okay, so halfway through the year. And also your thoughts on the HR position?
Yeah, I'd want to start recruiting for it right away. So I could definitely get it started in 2021.
I think it might be reasonable to do a phased approach for this one and just say half for 2021.
Well, so like if the council approved the budget before Thanksgiving, which they normally do, I'd start recruiting for that position right away. And I bet I could have it filled and ready to go by February.
Okay.
So those scenarios are included in these graphs, even though they're not 3s?
So all of these are 3s. These highlighted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we the task force collectively agreed that they are priorities. So.
Okay, I've missed that. I just wanted to make sure they were rolled in.
This is what's really good about this is the additional $1 million a year needed for street fund.
Yeah, I'm going, where how's that still look okay?
I think it's directly funded mostly by those traffic cameras.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, well, that's a huge impact, those cameras.
Yep. Does anybody have comments on, do we want to delay this additional street funding any more than 2022? My inclination is not. It should be in line with, let's see, we say that the traffic cameras are phased in halfway through 2022.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and realistically for us to design and get those overlays bidded out, we would need all of 21 to get ready for that anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So is everybody feeling settled on the items that we've highlighted already?
Yep.
Okay. So I think that leaves us the opportunity to look at some of these other ones, and we can, the property tax levy lift, we could consider this and just say that we should push this out to 2027 and say that we should look at a property tax levy lift in 2026 or 2027. Or we can talk about some of these utility taxes. The nice thing about utility taxes is those generally do grow with
inflation.
Inflation, yeah, thank you. They do grow with inflation, and so they'll sort of keep up with expenses as expenses grow with inflation. Does anybody have any preference on? Let's pull up this the positions and see where we are. Or do we want to talk about cost reductions? So on electric and gas, we were pretty low on the electric and water. Most people are saying it's a 0 or a 2. And for I think the levy lift, we were a little bit closer on a 5-cent increase for the levy lift. We got to a 1.5 rounded up to a 2 on that one.
I'd be willing to move a little bit on those, just as things have been explained to me a little bit more tonight. So
Remember that those require voter approval.
yeah,
Yep. And would that be a one-time bump, or is it a bump and then it stays the same for future years?
So it adds to the base, and so therefore, for this example, it would increase the base by 243,000 in terms of the property taxes levied, and then that would then continue to grow.
By 1% or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
It does depend, though, if you have a, I mean, there's the potential that, some agencies have thought about doing sunset periods on it. But the assumption that we had built in was that it would be a lift and it would stay in perpetuity.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, could you go back to the other spreadsheet just for 1 second? So if you look at this, with the exception of 21 and 22, in my mind, you have achieved your mission. You have balanced budgets 2023 through 2027. You're not running a deficit in any of those years. And you could stop right here and say mission accomplished.
but wouldn't that just put us back to like reconvening in 2027?
Don't you want to have a reunion?
I mean, always, but
I agree. I would like to at least give the council some direction on what our thoughts are as far as like addressing the structural deficit. Like, if all of the suggestions we're making are only a 5-year solution, I'd at least like to give them some direction on what our thoughts are on a more long-term direction. Even if we do stop here and say, okay, 5 years or 7 years we're good, at least have some direction on. And that's why I think do either the levy lift or utility taxes, and just kind of putting it in one of the out years and saying this is what we should consider starting in 2027. After we've kind of put in this phase 1 plan, let's look at this again, and this is what should be at the top of our list for these reasons, because it grows with inflation, because it grows, those kinds of things.
yeah, I mean, I think for me it's the sustainability, right, of the city, and that's also in our name of our task force. I don't feel comfortable personally just watching it dwindle back down to 0. So.
Okay, I'm glad you feel that way. We even before we started this task force, we debated, should this be a 6-year forecast or a 10-year forecast? And where I landed is it's so hard to see beyond 6 years.
Yeah.
And so you could try to make it so that things are going to look good in the out years, but we just don't know. We don't know what the economy is going to do. We don't know what expenses are going to, So anyway, but you guys do what you want to do. I think you're on a good track here. I just wanted to point that out as far as your core underlying mission. Your mission is accomplished in my view. But
And we're overachievers, that. I don't know why you're asking that.
We're also at 8:30, so
yeah.
So just remind folks that our mission or charter here was to solve the structural deficit.
Right.
And even though we've closed the budget deficit here, but over most of this period of time, we still haven't come up with any recommendation that would close that structural deficit. And looking at all of this over time, I don't see any way you could go about that other than some kind of a increased levy. Yep. And I absolutely agree, with what other folks have said about, beyond 5 years, you're talking about the land of Oz. You really can't have a whole lot of assurance about that. But I think at least to show good faith, it would be good to put something out here for 2027 at least, tied to one of those levy lifts, to say that's how we would address the structural deficit when it's going to be hitting again in 2026 or 2027.
Okay.
Okay, let me just remind you again, though, that even a levy lid lift, which again, you could go move forward with that, but let me just, give you some independent counsel here. That levy lid lift would only be subject to the 1% increase each year, plus then any other additional development. The structural problem here is that costs are expected to go up by 3%, and the revenue sources, the largest one right now, which is property tax, is only expected to grow by 1%. And now you'll introduce the photo enforcement. That's not expected to grow really at all. It'll be pretty much just flatline long term. So to really get at it, you would have to look at either revenue enhancements that had something that's more akin to the inflationary factors of about 3% a year growth to keep pace with the cost of doing business, or you'd have to look at something on the expenditure side that would start capping that. And that's going to be difficult to do long term. But
Well, yeah, understood, and that really is the dilemma Kenmore faces.
yeah.
Our revenue
Every
base
city in
is
Washington faces.
is property tax. If we were one of the other of our neighbors, which had huge sales tax revenue that, which has its own pitfalls, but at least you could look at it increasing closer to the rise in expenses over time. But we don't have that, and I think that's just going to be the fact of life. And it may be that the only way that I can see that we would address this at all is going to be a continual series of levy lifts over time. But that's the only place you can really go. Although looking between now and 2026, maybe we do come up with a development option that provides the income that would actually close that structural deficit. And having some time to do that and putting a marker out there that says we do that or else this is our only option may be worth putting into the report.
Yeah, and Shoreline did like that.
And another option that cities sometimes will explore is do you do a multi-year lift where you would go to voters once and you would, request increases of 2 or 3% per year for a certain number of years to help try to keep that pace.
Yeah. Hey, can I point out one more thing? So can you scroll down to Climate Action Plan? I know you as a committee are saying no to this, but I know my city council, and I'm pretty sure they are going to want to do this in 2022. They have a much greater sense of urgency about this, and maybe you leave that to them to solve. But just know that I'm pretty sure they're going to want that in the 2022 budget, and so there's another 50 grand a year. Just throwing that out there. But you guys recommend what you feel you should recommend, but I'm pretty sure the council is going to want to do climate action plan starting in 21.
I think if it's a priority for them, they can find funding.
Yeah.
So I highlighted to Steve's point. I did highlight the three options that we have. I guess there's this one too, the sales tax one. Here are the options that have a reasonable financial impact that grow at 2% or more. The tax, the B&O tax, or sales tax. And we were against the B&O tax and sell. I can't remember what people's comments were on the sales tax, but the utilities we were opposed to because it is generally a regressive tax. The B&O tax we were opposed to because we wanted to continue to encourage economic growth. And I don't remember what thoughts were on the sales tax. But B&O tax, that might be something to say, okay, we give Kenmore 7 years to continue an economic development plan, and see what that 7 years of no B&O tax looks like. And starting in 2027, start to consider that again and say, are we in a place where we're in a stable economic growth and we can enact a B&O tax.
I really appreciate that input from Jeff there. I agree with it. I think thinking out, to Rob's point, like, beyond 5 years, beyond 6 years, you don't know. I think, when we started this, the idea was to build the base of a complete budget, retool things to make sure that we avoid, falling into deficits or anything worse. But that doesn't mean that the other parts of the city and city planning stop, right? Like, we're not solving every problem. So the idea that we have now 4 years with an extra 2 years in the blue to figure out a way to drive more revenue, as Mike alluded to, I feel like is a really good launching off point. And then the fact that we're not exercising some of these is kind of the option, right? Like, if we don't solve the revenue issue, we may have to do, line item 15C or the B&O tax, et cetera.
So how I think maybe this is a proposal. Maybe we leave the scenario that we've outlined here as is, and say, hey, we've solved the problem of the next 7 years, and then acknowledge that we see this decline in the surplus driven by the structural deficit, but say that we hope to see continued economic growth, and with the idea that we could enact this B&O tax or these other taxes as the next phase. But since we don't have clarity what 7 years from now will look like, we will abstain from commenting what we think the council should do today. But these are the ideas that we have as we approach that, those out years.
Yep.
Mhm.
I agree with that.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that we've settled in a pretty good place. I think that we're buying ourselves a good amount of time. I'm happy that we are funding our streets. I think that was the large concern going into the task force. So I think that just by solving this problem alone is a huge accomplishment, and giving the city time through the pandemic, through the next couple of years to continue to work on the things that they've been doing a great job, getting that economic development, developing, residential and all these things, letting our city continue to grow. I think we did a good job. So as far as logistics, then I think what we have, this document that is mostly complete. We have all these numbers. I know many of you have more comments. I would love, as I said, the document is available online to all of you. I would love to see you go through, and you can go in and I'll show you the browser version. So this is the online browser version. And so each of you can go in and add comments. You can, so if Vernell had a specific comment on this item, then highlight this cell and just click add comment. And then this will add a comment.
Did you email us this link, Jeff?
I did. I can email it again just after this, but it is available. So that way that the council has all of our individual thoughts on each of these items. And I will go, if you are all okay with this, I will go ahead and summarize some of the thoughts, or maybe James can, because I know he's been taking great notes. But we can maybe summarize some of our thoughts on the regarding the decline in surplus and some of the things we talked about, and our thoughts.
I think I took good notes on that for you.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty good message.
Excellent. So I'll let James, I'll let you write that summary, and maybe we can, so we'll have 3 deliverables. We will have this scenario in Steve's model. that will show these graphs and the decisions and timing of these different years here. We'll have our matrix with the various comments and prioritization of each of the members. And then we will also have Jim will summarize our thoughts on. I think the priorities that you laid out at the beginning of the meeting would also be good to include in kind of that summary.
I'm going to throw out one thing. I really love this graphic, and I think this in itself has been the reason why you've been able to be so efficient and successful the last 2 nights. Having said that, when I look at this, will you reorder it so that those top priorities move from just interspersed into this to the top? Or I think in a memo or some kind of like brief report, it could be laid out at the very start as these are the things that, having gotten a number 3, are the task force's priority recommendations. Because I just think of the audiences that will see that from now on, including elected officials. And I think it's got to be something that comes up in a text that's like a page or 2 or 3 at the most. And I'm just gonna have one other thing. I do think it's really cool that you have the ability here to plug into comments into the little boxes like many of Fresnel's. But I also would say that, for example, one of the things I interpreted from you is that there are a couple of things that are really very important to all of you, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a couple of things like that, where I think that almost ought to be put into some kind of bullet pointed thing that stands out.
Well, these numbers match Steve's report, right? And that's why, so they're aligned that way.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that is a separate document where this is left, where it's prioritized from top to bottom. Is that what you're saying, Jim, where these are our top priorities?
Well, I was just thinking you could leave it this way and maybe yellow highlight the ones that are 3. But in putting together some kind of memo or very brief document, I would simply list them, say, here were, and I don't remember what the number is, but here are 9 strategies that the task force is rating as the top priorities that we believe the council should be implementing. And even you could put on the side, and these are the years that we believe they should be initiated. So it's a little bit replicating this. And I'm a visual person, so I love this, but I also just know that the public or council looking at these things also needs something that is like a document.
May I interject there? That's exactly where I was going, is all of this beautiful work, documentation, notes, preface, footnotes needs to be in a newsletter type. And I'm not saying an actual newsletter, but after every, event and everything, the report to be in a way that the public can see it, interact, go to a link to then show the bigger one. But it's like we need a landing page. Need a landing page for this to be able to say, look here for here's our spreadsheet top to bottom. Look here for here's our top priorities. Look, link here for here's our, I want to put a survey in there as well that gives the public a chance to say, what are your ideas to generate revenue? There's a plethora out there. We're not even letting to have a input on that. So there's just some things that we could do as a task force to continue engaging our community. That's being equitable, that's being inclusive. How are we gonna, here's what we got so far. Now help us go the next step. Don't just leave it like, okay, done, or, not done, but just, we still need to work as a community to support ourselves. How are we going to do that? Let's put our brains together. We might have any idea what comes back, just like I, give out to students, and hey, they have some brilliant in solving some things. So let's do that as well with our community, and put a little landing page and let them know where our bigger docs are. But basically, here's what we got. Look, thank you for your help. A newsletter. Thank you for participation. Here's where we went, and then here's our next steps.
Jeff,
I'm a teacher. I know that just all comes out like that. So
Well,
Um,
I'm listening to you for now, and I'm just wondering, we know the council will receive all of this September 10th. And then you
Yeah.
you're already launching into the budget process. So in 76, I think, aren't there a lot of community engagement methods, forums or surveys, or even meetings with the budget process? And then would some of this be kind of surfaced or floated to the top so it gets attention? I guess that's for Rob and Joanne.
Well, it'll definitely get attention when we have our budget retreat next month. And then we get into the budget presentations through the rest of September, all of October. There's public hearings where the public is invited to come and speak on the budget. We present the budget.
Okay.
Yeah. and
Well,
those-
I just I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, just all through October and the first part of November, that will be going on. There'll be budget discussions pretty much at every council meeting.
And so I just appreciate so much, Jeff, you laying out a way so we can digest it, understand it, interact with it, and go. This was like a beautiful, perfect lesson. I know so many teachers who would love to learn from this. And I'm just saying, since I haven't been to them before, I'm not a financial and statistic person. I have a hard time understanding what numbers mean. I understand them more on what they feel like. I know that may not make any sense, but like what the experience of numbers feels like, looks like, and is a lived out experience. I have much more experience with numbers in that way. And so I'm also trying to balance everything that we just did and be able to have our community be educated about it in all the different ways that we learn and interpret it. And so, yes, this is all good. And the committee, the city council will understand and operate in this way, but I wouldn't receive it like that. I'd need to receive it like this, just like we all have different learning styles. So that's why I was just suggesting some landing page to be able to, for our community to be able to interact, bring more in who maybe don't have, even time to look at all of this and understand what we did at such a depth level, but we can scenario it and preface it with, Jim, the 3 things that stood out, the preface, here's what we wanted, what the balancing was about. Here's what we did with the structure. Here's what we did with just to lay it out so it's more of layman's terms so everyone can have a chance to appreciate, interact, and engage. Ooh, those are 3 good words. I hope that got through. So.
I agree with you completely. I wonder at the scope.
I know.
Of what we
I'll help.
both from a time commitment standpoint and
I know. I'll help. I don't know how, but I'll help. I know what I'll give you some examples.
Jeff, is it possible, just from you're way better at Excel spreadsheets than me, just to pull those highlighted 3s for us and just kind of put them on a different spreadsheet, but link to this one that will just automatically pull that so we could just see those the priorities in order. I don't know if that's an easy thing to do.
Oh, no.
What if this scenario sheet was then sorted by the 3s and the 2s and the 1s?
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at before.
Yeah.
Joanne was saying better.
Well, I think the numbers though here correlate with Steve's report, and so being able to reference that was
right. Yeah. So I can very easily.
Would you not use those numbers still? Like even if you had the top 9 and they were not number 1 through 9, but they were like 4 and 7 and 18 and whatever.
Oh, okay. Just out of order, but
And there would be some banner or something that says these are the consensus recommendations, the top priorities of the task force. And then here's the next group. I love the way Jeff came up with the categories before. It was, priority is number 3, secondary priority is 2, pursue it as a last resort was number 1. I mean, if there was something that, again, explained that.
So I can do this in a number of ways. I can reorder them. We can do a summary page. I'm happy to present these in a list in a lot of different ways. We can show the model and only show the oh goodness.
Doesn't quite work that way, but
I broke something. Oh no!
just undo. Just undo. You'll be fine.
Okay.
I don't want to put in, another, like, you've done an extraordinary amount of work, so I don't want to add a bunch more to your plate.
So I'm happy to present it in different ways. I don't know if I can commit to typing a memo style summary.
Well, let me do that, and then I'll give it to you all, and you'll have all the rights to edit it. And I can even do that in the next 2 days.
And in my office with Nancy Owsley and her staff help, we can help with the communications piece and sending it out in a way that's easy for people to read and having that landing page that Vernell's talking about.
Yeah, we'll definitely have it on the web. We'll, I'm sure, talk about it in our newsletter and any other communication pieces we put out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will commit to I will put it in order of priority. The matrix, I will put it in order of priority, so that they're grouped. Here are the threes. Here are the twos. Here are the ones. Here are the zeros. Probably sorted by dollar impact. So threes, and then by dollar impact, and then I will. And then we'll save the model view with our scenario with our threes, and then I will let Jim take over the memo style summary of those items that are our priorities, along with a summary of kind of what you talked about earlier today when you were going over the
principles, as people,
principles,
for example, call them.
Yeah, I think that is worth keeping, and then also some high level direction on our thoughts about the B&O tax or some of these utility taxes or the levy lift as strategies to consider in the out years as we see the structural deficit continue to not the structural deficit, but the surplus continue to dwindle in the out years.
And I will circulate that among all of you and give you the opportunity to edit it. We'll establish some timeline by which you have to get back to me.
Yeah, and can I talk about timeline? The council likes to have plenty of time to read this stuff and digest it in advance of their meeting. What I'm looking at is having this all go live to the internet and to the council on Friday of next week. So finished product live to the internet and to the council on whatever that Friday is of next week. Is that the 4th or 5th? Fourth. That gives them 5 days to read it, 6 days to read it. One other question I have for you is at the city council retreat on Thursday the 10th, would one or more of you like to come to the council and help present this?
I think I can be there. Is it 5:30?
5:30, yeah.
I get some help. Someone else want to come?
I'd be happy to attend.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
What day did you say?
It's Thursday, September 10th at 5:30. And it's going to be, we have it going until 9:30. So we're covering a lot of material, not just this, but some other things.
Will this be at the beginning of the meeting, Rob?
No. I'd put this about 6:30. Because one of the things we're going to be doing is updating the work plans and all the priorities and goals they set out for us at the beginning of the year. And we may actually even be asking them to update their goals, given that some de facto goals have inserted themselves into our work plan, like the pandemic. So we'll probably be asking them to update their council goals, and that'll probably take a little bit of time. So this item I probably won't get started until about 6:30 is my guess.
And it's in person or remote?
All online on Zoom.
Okay. All right. You knew that I was going to be remote, but yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Sounds like we have a plan. It's 9 o'clock. Thank you all for staying a half hour late. But I do think we should have there should be a round of applause or something. It's such a great job.
Yeah.
Yay.
Wow.
It was super to work with you all. What a talented group of citizens Kenmore has.
I gotta say, I've been in city stuff for 25 years, and this has been one of the best, if not the best, citizen commission, committee, task forces, and the process and how it all came together and how I loved it. It's one of the best, if not the best I've seen. A good job.
Can I take you all with me to all the cities that I'm serving in California, Oregon, Nevada, California, Washington?
I wanted to say
guys,
thank you to
really.
Steve, because he really set it up well for us.
Yes.
Yeah, Steve and Rob, thanks so much for your time, Rob. This is like more of your job on top of your job every time you meet with us. So I appreciated all of that.
And Joanne.
Appreciate. Yeah.
And Joanne.
Thank you. I know task force, I just usually want to run. I'm like, no, not a month-long task force. So when I heard how long you guys were going, I'm like, okay, the end. I think I can handle it the end. But man, this was like, bam, very right on point. So beautiful.
I wanted to tell you how good I feel about it too. It's something that I've felt for years that we should do, even though I know it would be a huge workload issue. But I'm so glad to have thoughtful resolutions to at least the next 6 years and not have exhausted all of our capacity to still cut some expenses or raise some revenues if we need to. We still have that capacity. And when you're being evaluated, like for a bond rating, et cetera, that's really important that you, one, have a plan, you have some stability, and you still have some capacity if things go south. So those are really important criterias, and I appreciate that you came up with solutions that respected that.
Because we're going to be issuing another set of bonds for walkways and waterways in early 2021. So this is going to really help set that up nicely.
It's going to help us maintain our excellent bond rating.
AAA.
I just appreciate the lens too that everybody has and brought to the table, and how you're moving through the world just to be able to speak it into the air and make it reality, and understand that is so refreshing. So thank you so much.
Thanks for willing to help out at the end here. You were awesome.
Thank you.
Essential.
Hope I helped.
Big time.
Absolutely.
Thank
you. Okay, we'll be circulating things among each other over the next few days. So the work isn't quite done, but congratulations.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Cheers.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.